All right. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Unnamed Fitness Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Sullivan.
And I am your host, Megan Markowitz. And we may have a new name coming up. Debatable.
We're seriously considering it.
Maybe let the people vote.
What's that?
We should let the people vote. We put it out.
We would need more than one suggestion in order for people to vote. And so far, one person has given us 2 suggestions. And they're both good suggestions. We're sitting on it. We tend to be a little impulsive, so we're sitting on it right now.
It's fair.
I know myself. I know who I am.
That's how we got this podcast in the first place.
Yeah, that's actually how we started this thing. It was like, hey, we should do a podcast. And then we started, and now we haven't stopped. So today, what we're going to be talking about is in the human movement method, we actually have a process for helping people change biomechanical patterns. And
what's a biomechanical pattern, Ryan?
A biomechanical pattern is like how you stand or sit or walk or run or jog or climb or crawl or throw. But a lot of it goes back to this concept of spinal engine mechanics. I'm going to be harping on this for a while. Basically, one of the things that happens is that over time or with injury or things like one of my favorites is, let's just use an ankle injury. Okay. How many people have rolled their ankle? Raise your hand. Okay, I can't see you. Oh, no, I can see you. But
just kidding. I haven't rolled it. I've definitely done something to it.
Yeah, but most people have rolled an ankle, right?
Yeah.
And then this is just a really simple example. And then what happens is you start to kind of shade away from that ankle. So you don't stand on it as much. You shift your weight to the other foot, and then it gets better. And then you think to yourself, well, it's better and everything's fine and nothing changed. And that's not entirely true. When we have these little injuries, or for example, if somebody takes a fall because it's negative 20 degrees outside and everything's a sheet of ice in Michigan. I had like 4 clients fall in the same week.
Did you really?
Oh yeah, 100%. Last week when it was just absolutely ridiculously cold.
Literally 3 degrees here. Literally.
Yeah, and everybody just slipped, fell, boom.
Yep.
I just had another client come to me who was on a trip overseas. And they were like looking at their phone to like look at a map, and they stepped off of a curb and rolled their ankle. And then they came in and they're like, yeah, I'm ready to go. And I'm like, and they're like, it only hurts when I turn it side to side and when I wear high shoes. And I'm like, what do you mean when you wear high shoes? Well, when I wear something with high ankle support, it really bothers it. I'm like, you might have fractured your fibula. Like I was like, that could be a fibular shear or a fibular break. Like you should go to the doctor. And lo and behold, it was a fracture of some kind. So it is like, and with, for example, this is a really common injury where the fibula is not a weight-bearing bone. The tibia is. And so if the fibula either fractures or shears, you can still walk on it. You just can't turn your foot. And if you were to do it a second time, it could get a lot worse. And you're more prone to doing that. And it affects all of your mechanics. So then what happens is you hurt your foot, you fall and hurt a hip, and then your whole body shifts. And now you're in this low shoulder, high shoulder, and then I got neck pain on this side. And then 6 months later, I don't know why, but I threw out my back, and I got this one hip that's always tight. And people wonder how they wind up with high hip pathology, where you have one hip that's higher than the other, and then one shoulder that's higher than the other, and then your head's all jacked one way. And it charts back to something that wasn't a big deal.
I'm only smiling in case people are seeing that, because this happens so often. And I will have to say, out of all my clients, I would say all but maybe 1 or 2 of them, either at the beginning or currently, have a shoulder imbalance.
Right. And most of the time, if there is a shoulder imbalance, there's a hip imbalance. They tend to go together.
Mm-hmm.
And so that being said, this is why when we look at saying to somebody who, like, we're both trainers. So if you're listening and you're a trainer And and instead of just saying, okay, we'll make modifications, but you actually want to have a process to help a client recover from injury, recover from surgery, and start to restore postural and biomechanical balance. That's why we train this system, is because that's where the shearing force on the joints, that's where the tendon inflammation, that's where the grinding of cartilage happens, is in these imbalances over long periods of time. So
it's the same idea as if like you're gonna, like, it's one time. If you do it if you only take one step ever, okay, not gonna be a big deal on that one step. If you are walking every single day like you do because you are a human, and that same imbalance what word am I trying to say? Compounds. It compounds over and over and over. So the imbalance just keeps getting worse every tiny little bit of time.
Right. And what you're really doing is you're stealing from future health. And this is one of those things where, well, it'll be fine, I can just get the knee replaced. Or, oh, it'll be fine, I can just get the hip replaced. I mean, if you are a person of the means to do that, that is an option. If, for example, that's not something you want to personally do in your life and you would like to put that off as long as possible, also an option.
Also, when you go through surgeries like that, there is intense recovery time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
so
huge.
Not only is there an imbalance going on that led you to that, when you're done, you have an even further imbalance in potentially the same way, different way, what have you. And then you're going to have to go through a whole process to readjust your body to the new body that you have after the surgery.
And what's weird is that your nervous system and your muscles are built for your old body. So the mapping is all wrong. Yeah. And this is why, for example, in hospitals, they chart longevity to your last major fall, because this is where the cumulative injury cycle begins. And every time something happens, it compounds. Every surgery you go through, it compounds. Every condition you have, it compounds. So this is why in our system, we advocate low inflammation diets. We advocate taking care of soft tissue, taking care of mobility for your joints, and strengthening your body in a way that reinforces good biomechanics, not just be a Chad and gain that muscle, brah. Like, we're trying to get a little bit more than a 200-gram protein diet into somebody's like worldview. And so
in addition to that, you still need to take into account the stressors that are going on in your life. And when I say stressors, that means your emotional stress, your mental stress, because as we know, that plays a direct role into what your body is feeling. So we know a lot of times people hold stress all right here. So when they come in and they're like, and you're like, oh, do you think that maybe you're a little stressed at work? And they're like, oh, everything's fine. Everything's fine. It's totally fine. I had a client one time who the first day I was like, okay. And I know his shoulders were literally like that. And I was like, so sometimes people hold stress, and I was going through the whole thing. And I was like, do you think you do that? He's like, I haven't really noticed it. Next session, he comes in, he goes, yep. So that's exactly where I hold all my stress. Because you start to notice these things. And then you start realizing that gradually it goes up. It's not like one day you have a stressful moment and you're like, oh, there it is. It gradually over time.
Well, and if you work hands-on with people like I do, and like some of I have clients that are also manual therapists, and I train trainers and performers and all that stuff. And people that are hands-on, we all agree that like you can totally put your hands on a person and know how stressed they are. It's in their tissue. Like it's literally in their tissue. And we do know that there is smooth muscle fiber in fascia. So fascia has a contractile function. It's slow. It's a very small thing. It happens over time, but part of fascia's function is to absorb shock. So if you're in a world that is stressful, you're going to be holding tension in not just in your muscles, but in your fascia, to prepare yourself to respond to a stressful environment, meaning I either need to go into high activity, I need to absorb physical shock, meaning I've been hit. It's when I did martial arts, I always used to say my favorite weapon is the ground. It's everywhere I go and I don't have to carry it. And it's because my goal as a martial artist was to get a person into such a horrifying tailspin tumble that it would be a devastating fall. That was the goal.
Okay.
So I don't need to fight a person. They need to fight gravity. That was always the attitude, because I'm not a big guy. So, and if we reverse engineer that to a healthy place and a wellness place, what we're saying is we want to increase your coordination, your balance, and your effectiveness and ability to move so that you don't run that risk in your environment.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, the one thing I've been working with clients on recently is restoring neck function, because your neck, if it's out of balance, can cause enormous amounts of anxiety. Your body gets very threatened if the neck feels under threat.
Neck has been a topic that's been coming up a lot lately, actually. So I just started this course that I'm taking that has to do with like shadow work and some also, but it incorporates body. And one of the prompts that she had us go through, and that usually there's tapping involved, was literally going like this with your neck, because you have lymph for how do you call it? What do you call them?
Lymph nodes.
Lymph nodes. I always want to call them lymph. No, I don't know what I want to call them. But anyway, there's a lot of them in here. And I have found this to be extremely helpful in stressful moments. And I've had clients who specifically their necks have been coming up in the past week,
Mm-hmm.
where even rolling a ball right here, like usually it's the traps that hold, but it has seemed to kind of gradually work its way up the neck lately.
Mm-hmm. Your vagus nerve is also there.
Vagus nerve.
If you're stimulating your vagus nerve as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's and so we have to understand that when the body takes on damage, the body then changes motor patterns, and then when it changes motor patterns, the fascia comes in and reinforces the new pattern, so that there's more spring and more resilience in that area, and where the injury was, it runs fascia in there to generate stability, like an internal cast.
Mm-hmm.
And so then what happens is, this is where we get into the cumulative injury cycle, and when we start losing what we call the loci of movement, where all of a sudden I feel stiffer and my joints ache and I don't know why, and yada yada yada, because the fascia does not begin or end. It is one continuous. It's not like your muscles have fascia and then your skin has separate fascia and then your organs have separate. It is one continuous interwoven system, and it transmits more information than you can ever feel on a conscious level. That's not, you can't possibly take in all that information, and if you could, you probably wouldn't be very comfortable. I'm just going to throw that out there. Like, there are people that have something called myofascial pain syndrome, where literally they feel pain in their fascia.
Oh my God.
They just do.
So
And
specific parts, or like throughout?
no, everywhere.
Or
It's
everywhere?
throughout. Yeah, and it flares and it goes away, and it has no, we don't understand it very well.
Do you have clients that have this?
No, I don't know, not currently. But
Okay.
but it would be you'd be hard pressed to even get diagnosed with it. But it does exist.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, that seems like very intense.
Well, I mean, for example, like in order to get, let's just say you think you have an autoimmune disease and you want to get diagnosed with an autoimmune disease because you need the benefits that go along with that.
Yeah.
Because let's say you need to go on disability, it can take between 3 and 7 years to get a proper diagnosis for an autoimmune disease. So if it takes that long, and we've got 1/4 of the population that's diagnosed with that,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine how long it would take to get something that science, that like you can't even get your doctor to acknowledge that you might have a soft tissue injury. Like if they can't ultrasound it and they can't x-ray it,
It's not there.
and they can't medicate you for it, it ain't there. So like, I don't know how you could get you would need to see someone that is such a significant specialist, and you would have to go through the process that it takes to get to that person. I just can't even imagine how long it would take. So
Yeah, that was like,
if you're,
yeah, like 10 years ago, I would say that was the same process that you just described for endometriosis, where like you literally, like people literally did not think it was a thing. Doctors didn't think it was a thing. And you had to find a very specific person, usually not close to you. And then you had to maneuver your way to get there and then have them diagnose you.
right. And at this point, with the way healthcare costs work, you have to be a person of means to do that.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're in the city of Detroit, like you, I mean, it is, let's put it this way. One of the most fascinating things traveling all over that I get to, like right now in the Czech Republic, the postural and biomechanical pathologies here are completely different than they were in Detroit. And the postural and biomechanical pathologies in Detroit are completely different than they are in California. Like they're not the same. And this is something I've witnessed, and it has to do with a lot of different factors. But one thing what's that?
Are you talking about like typical patterns you see, like imbalances? Okay.
Yeah. Like it's really common here for people to have valgum knees where their knees turn in. And yet when you're in, what's that?
In Detroit or in Prague?
In Prague. And then in Detroit, it was actually super common. I even saw very small children with extreme bows and a very different, and sway back postures. And it's just a different set of postural pathologies. And it's also important to note that many of these pathologies are either can be caused by at a very young age or compounded by stress and trauma. So you put a person in a place where they have limited healthcare. You put them under extreme financial, emotional, and medical stress, and then you let them live like that for an extended period of time, and they don't have an option.
Normal.
What's that?
You make it seem normal.
Yeah, and then you make it totally normal, and you normalize it. And then when they come in and they're like, I'm anxious and in pain, they're like, well, then you should really get your anxiety under control. Yeah. And you're like, so anyway, the point is that when we work with people, we try to find at first these pain points in the body and teach myofascial release with tools so that people then have the ability to start to understand and alleviate their own discomfort, because there is nothing more traumatic than having pain. Oh, did I lose you?
You paused. I can hear you. There you go. You're good. Just kidding. You pause again.
Oh, there you are. That's okay. So there is nothing more traumatic than having pain, not being able to find out the cause, and not knowing if it will ever go away. That is simultaneously threat and powerlessness. So we try to enable our clients to understand their discomfort, and we try to give them tools to begin to improve the situation, which empowers them to get out of that cycle. It also lowers the anxiety, which then also allows those people to begin to come out of that fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode and into a more engaged, aware, and interactive mode. And that's how you transform trauma into empowerment. That's really key.
And I think that one of the things that is extremely helpful is understanding how you got there. Because if you are going about your life and you're like, I don't know why this thing is happening, and there's something you're continuously, repeatedly doing, and you are unaware that that is the thing that is causing the discomfort, the pain, what have you, then that is a very different perspective than if you are intentionally doing a thing that you know is going to cause an outcome.
Right. And if you're in the, I don't know what's going on, there's nothing I can do about it, F it, you're disassociating.
You are disassociating 100%.
And it's just going to get worse because your body is crying for care. That's what it needs, is care.
But if you can't hear that, if you cannot hear the cry for care, go ahead and tell us what's going to happen.
Exactly. Then it's going to scream louder. It's going to. So then once the level of discomfort starts to go down and the panic starts to subside, then we start getting into mobilizing through movement. doing certain movements that start to mobilize and open up and allow those tissues to start to pull apart and hydrate, and then we start to activate. And the key to this is that when we do the soft tissue work, it relieves the pain. It also hydrates, increases blood flow, and turns on the nervous system, which increases neuroplasticity. Then when we start to move it, the brain starts to map the area in a new way, and it starts to bring things online. Then when we activate it, we start to form new neural pathways that allow our body to perceive our internal and external world in a different way, which starts to make those changes more permanent and build new, more effective patterns, which means we're moving further and further away from the pain place. Now, if you're under extreme stress or you get injured again, don't be shocked if those patterns light up, because once they're built in, they're there. And so what we have to do is, instead of try to erase them or act like they're not there, we need to build new, more complex pathways that absorb them, but make them more effective and make them more efficient, because the old injury is not going away. It needs to be worked with, not worked against.
And I think that there's an idea that you get an injury, you go to PT, and then when PT is complete, you're done and it's gone, and everything is back to the way it used to be. And with this theory, this is more similar to therapy. If you have an emotion and then you choose to shove the emotion down, we all know it just, and then it usually explodes or boils up or it comes out in some way that you didn't expect. So opposed to that method, you're taking that emotion, you're taking that injury, you're taking that spot or discomfort, and you're addressing it and working with it, and then incorporating it into your exercise routine, your daily lifestyle, habits, all of that, by acknowledging it and then working with it.
And the idea that it's crazy to me, and it will always be crazy to me, the idea that somehow your psyche and your body are not connected. Like, that will always be an insane concept to me, because emotions are biological events. And it works the other way too, where there could be something not quite, maybe my inflammation's high, maybe I'm eating food that I'm sensitive to, maybe I don't have good sleep patterns, maybe. And these things cause anxiety, and it turns out there's an underlying condition. It's not psychological. And then the other way, it is possible that I can have emotional events that are, if I am anxious all of the time, it can literally cause cortisol inflammation, and elongated inflammation can turn into an autoimmune disease. So I can literally be in an emotional state for an elongated period of time that can ultimately result in an autoimmune disease. That is possible. So
did I talk about the posture last week?
I mean, tell me what you mean.
Posture thing.
We talk about posture every week.
Sorry. The posture video I watched, the 2-minute video.
Oh, the posture power stuff.
Posture power.
Yeah. Totally.
Because like that, it's like so not it works like how it works both ways. So like the way your body is going to affect how your mind is working, and then how your mind is working can also literally cause an illness, and it can also have positive effects as well.
Right. And this is why when I work with clients, and when you work with clients, we always talk about doing soft tissue work inside frame of tolerance. Because you shouldn't be like wincing when you're doing soft tissue work, because you're just moving the tension from one point to another. It's not, and you're not showing care. If your body is showing signs of overtraining, injury, or any of these other things, you should work with it in a very similar way that you work with a child, because your body needs that care. Range of motion. One of the things that happens when I coach is I'm always saying, how does that feel? Tell me what that feels like. Where do you feel that? Because I'm trying to get people to check in with their bodies and be able to use an increased vocabulary to describe their experience. what that does is it allows them then to understand their experience. But if it's, I don't know, how many reps do I need to do? 10 reps. Okay, I did 10 reps. How did it feel? I don't really know. Okay, well, maybe we should do it again. Like, well, because there's this idea that exercise is a thing that happens to me, not a thing that I participate in.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people don't really want that to be a thing.
Right.
They would rather disassociate and then have it happen and then.
And the industry's filled with that. You go into a really great class and it's adrenaline filled and you jump around and you barely remember it and you come out and you panted really hard and you sweat a lot and the next day you're sore and you're like, wow, that was really great. I probably burned a lot of calories. And again, if you have these biomechanical dysfunctions, that lasts about 6 to 12 weeks. You get knee pain, you get back pain, you get shoulder pain, you get neck pain, and then you fall off the bandwagon. And this is why we opt for as I was explaining to someone the other day, it's a sliding scale. I take you through a process. And so depending on where you're at any given point, once you've learned the whole process, you can check in with yourself that day and be like, okay, I'm going to be down in the care zone.
Yeah.
You can check in on another day and be like, I'm going to be up here in the intensity zone, but it's a sliding scale. I don't need to do everything every day. And I don't need to always be on a constantly increasing intensity protocol. Like I can, before it becomes an injury, address it and then move back into the mechanic. And I can even identify patterns that maybe I need to go back and retrain. And understand that it's actually this process, not this process.
And just to clarify, so we're not saying that high intensity exercise is nowhere in the process.
No.
That 100% be part of the process. What we're saying is that, I guess I maybe used this example before, but if a client shows up and their dad died and they have a really stressful day at work, and then they also had a shoulder injury from like a couple weeks ago that they're still working on, that is not the time to then put even more stress on the nervous system by doing 1,500 burpees, 5 thrusters, followed by an intense cardio kick on the butt on the assault bike. Not the day. Not the day.
But I rolled my feet and my glutes, so what's the problem? And it's about developing a broad view that is about trying to constantly work on a process of release it, mobilize it, activate it. Once we've established that calibration model and we're in a good mechanical zone, then we work on stability, dynamics. We start working on coordination, balance, control. Then we start working on explosive power and throwing dynamics. And then we start working on straight up raw strength and power. But that's the last one that we work on because we're trying to repattern people into a place where when they take on heavy load and high axial load, they're doing so in a way that's balanced and controlled for them.
And they also have the tools necessary should anything happen. So what that means is, like, if you have, let's say you're in the middle of that zone, you're doing some high intensity exercise, your shoulder, you feel it in your shoulder, you're like, ooh, hold on, I know this feeling. You have the tools to go back and recalibrate that shoulder. Maybe it's a little bit of release, maybe it's a little bit of mobility, maybe it is strengthening, it's probably all of them. And you can go back and use those tools, opposed to crashing out in that phase and then feeling like you can't do anything.
And also on the psychological end, it's the difference between, oh crap, I'm going to be injured and I can't do anything, to, oh, I know this feeling. I've encountered this before. I know what I did before. I have the tools to resolve this issue. So I'm going to do the responsible thing and resolve this issue for myself, or work with my trainer to resolve this issue. And then we'll get back into this zone. And maybe I went a little too hard. And instead of it being a, well, suck it up, buttercup, attitude, it's more of a, well, I want to be able to do this for the rest of my life. And I'm going to start training at 40 the way I intend to train at 65.
Yep. My friend and I were having this conversation about how when things come up that are inconvenient,
Mhm.
that it is really just about adding another step to the process,
Yeah.
opposed to it being a complete just like destroyed process. So when it comes up or you have an injury, it's not that, okay, it's time to hang out on the couch, do nothing, and wait for it to go away.
Yep.
Sometimes complete rest is necessary. However, most of the time, it's like you actually just have another step you need to do to get to your goal. You're still working on that goal. You just have another thing that is going to help you further in that goal.
Right. And in my personal philosophy, life is about creating as many opportunities as possible. Instead of saying, well, when my cholesterol goes up, I'll take the pill. When my hip gives out, I'll get the surgery. That's, in my mind, that's making me more and more and more and more dependent on something versus, again, if you have a choice in life to create more opportunity, wouldn't you want to spend every day and every week and every month and every year creating more opportunity for yourself rather than diminishing it? For me, philosophically speaking, I would like to create more opportunity. I would like to help other people create more opportunity. But the thing is you have to have more than a binary understanding. It's not either in pain or it's not. It's, well, today it feels like it's tight. I can tell that it's tight. It's kind of burning. It reminds me of the time that I had a pinched nerve in my back. So instead of just rolling the area that hurts, I'm working on the front of the thigh, the back of the thigh, the glute, and the lower spine, because I know that those are functional units. And I know that because I've worked with somebody that's, but yeah, essentially. So it's, we're trying through this process to empower people to help themselves. And it's about giving information and experience. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not necessarily a big fan about empowering people, that phrase, but I don't know another way to say it just yet.
I don't either, but when I say empower, to me, what that means is it's the give a man a fish, feed a man a fish theory.
Yeah, I think it's more, I think I'm like more attached to the idea of access.
Yes.
And like knowledge sharing. Yeah.
And okay. And for me, it's, well, you should probably feed them while you're teaching them. I kind of have this idea that like,
that is what we're doing. Yeah.
Right. Like it's not one or the other. It's both. You got to feed them while you teach them. It's, and in the end, I believe historically, evolutionarily, humans are designed not as individuals, but as groups. Yeah. We're designed for touch. We are designed for interdependence. We are designed for community resilience. And this has been proven historically with humanity over and over and over again. I actually had a conversation this morning where I was like, actually, individuality might be a hallucination. We may not be as alone as we think we are, because all of us are having a similar experience. We're just having our version of that experience, but we're all having a similar experience.
And I think that we're in a time where the way information is distributed, it feeds the idea that we are having a very separate experience from people. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about how, because our social media is curated specifically for us, we no longer have the collective information that everybody gets, opposed to like, we know we subscribe to the news we want to subscribe to. We follow the specific people we want to follow. So then all the information coming in is to us. So in like specific to us, opposed to the group where we're all getting the same information so we all can see it.
And I think like, and I've worked with some pretty extreme cases in my career. I cannot say that I personally am having the same physical or emotional experience they're having.
Right.
But we're all having the experience of having a body.
Yep.
And there's actually a lot you can learn from different bodies, even from the masculine to the feminine, or to the, and there's huge spectrums on this. And so the reason I bring this up is because we I kind of joke, I'm a little bit of a comic book nerd, that I essentially have a similar relationship with my body as like the Venom character. I'm just kind of constantly having this conversation with my own physical existence. And I'll say things like, well, my body wants this. Like I've been just craving eggs, like nonstop. All I want to eat is eggs. And I can now tell the difference between what I call a visceral craving and a psychological craving. When I want a psychological craving, it's about comfort. It's about taking care of some inner psychological need. When I have a visceral craving, I like want to murder to eat that. It is, and it's weird stuff. It's really strange stuff. So I tend to kind of listen to that. What's that?
Can you guess what my body's craving?
Chicken skin?
Not the skin.
That's what I've been craving. So
pure bowls of meat. Like literally, I had ground turkey for breakfast today. And this is because for the update, here's a little update for those who have been following, not sticking to any plant-based diet, that my energy levels were so low. Mostly because I think that like I didn't supplement it enough with enough protein or figure out how to cook tofu yet. But like I'm working on it. But yeah, I just want pure bowls of meat. But I understand what you're talking about too. I can understand the difference between having like I consider like a biological, like I want to eat. I don't know if that's the right word, but I want to like eat a thing opposed to like I feel a certain way emotionally and want to complement that with food, which I don't usually have that as often as I have the like pure body.
Right. And I would say that this goes back to the interpreting discomfort and pain.
Yeah.
This is a conversation with your physical self. There's something called biosemiotics. It's about how the idea that a cat would ever think the way that you think is ridiculous because a cat does not have the same physical form you have. It literally experiences the world in a completely different way. Therefore, its priorities, value system, like the idea that and then we label that as non-intelligence. And it's like, no, it just literally does not have the same experience as you. So it cannot develop the same sense of meaning as you. It just can't do that. So
like you can like have an idea or find similarities, but no, like you will never have that experience, like to your point.
No, you just can't. And so we are all bodies having an experience, and we can help each other listen to our own bodies. That's an individual experience, but we are all doing that in our own way. And so this is a big part of the softer work that we do. I think
sounds like it doesn't play a role, but it actually plays a huge role.
Huge role. Yeah. Huge. So anyway, that's our shtick for today. So thank you for joining us for this philosophical adventure.
The body and physics. What did you say? Philosophical
adventure. Yeah, but the key here is that it's about in a more roundabout way. If we looked at it from the release it, mobilize it, activate it, it's kind of like confront it, understand it, work with it, kind of a vibe.
We're really just body therapists. So
kind of. Yeah. So coaches. We're coaches. We're coaches. Yeah. So, all right. Next week, I'm sure there will be something else interesting
that we're going to talk about.
Yep. All right.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.